And welcome to Nostalgia Alley. We have an absolutely fantastic show for you tonight. If the name Vicar of Vintage Vinyl, Swami of Sacred Songs, Stiles on Your Dolls, if you recognize that, you are going to recognize our next guest. It's Danny Stiles. Danny has been on the radio for over 50 years, a legend in broadcasting. It is my pleasure to welcome you on the show, Danny.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's 59 years.
59 years.
It'll be 59 years on December the 4th when I celebrate my 59th anniversary as a record-spinning radio host at John's Pizzeria in New York City, right in the heart of the theater district.
Right.
Public's invited, and I'm having a lot of my friends, guests, entertainers,
wow,
and lay people coming to see me and congratulate my 59 years.
That's phenomenal. You must hold a record as far as a broadcaster. 59. I don't know anybody who's done 59 years on radio.
I don't. The only guy I know that's been in radio longer than I have is Paul Harvey. And he doesn't spin records.
He doesn't spin records?
No.
That's
no.
amazing.
I don't know any record spinner that's still playing records on radio that's around longer than I've been.
I must say that you are keeping radio alive. You are keeping the spirit and the heart of radio alive for 59 years. And I want to thank you. And
thank you.
Well, my fans want to thank you. You're an inspiration.
Thank you very much.
Now, were you a big fan of radio growing up as a kid?
I guess I was, more than, but all the kids loved radio. That was one of the main sources of entertainment. And I was a kid during the Great Depression, and it was free. So it was even more important, I suppose, than movies.
Yes.
Movies cost a dime to go to a movie, or 15 cents or whatever it was when I was a little kid. And yeah, radio was fascinating, especially network radio, which was very prestigious when I was a child.
It's terrific. And
before the Civil War.
Before the Civil War. Well, radio is a theater of imagination. You can you hear any of the great radio shows and your imagination takes over.
Yeah, I think it was Orson Welles that said it.
Oh, I love Orson Welles.
Radio is theater of the mind.
Theater of the mind.
And it is. You conjure up a picture of what's going on, and I play with it a little bit because I always had a tendency to paint a picture of my surroundings and what the studio was like, and the broadcast origination and stuff.
I love the way you describe the studio every time you're on.
Yeah,
that's a wonderful. Describe it to our viewers.
You don't mean with the bananas, do you?
I don't know
a while
about the
ago.
bananas.
I stopped doing that, but I used to.
That sounds good too.
Well, I had a friend who was in the produce business, a banana king. So just for laughs, I used to say that he decorates the studios with bunches of bananas, and it gives me inspiration because it's my favorite fruit, bananas.
My wife's too.
Well, it's healthy. For example, now, during the week, I'm on from 10 to 12 at night on WNSW, which used to be WNJR, back in the days when I was the cat man.
Yes, the 60s.
50s.
50s, you were cat
Well,
man.
the 50s and the 60s. I started in 1953, and I was with WNJR until 1967. I bought a radio station in Waterbury, Connecticut, and gave up my job, sad to say, because it didn't work out for me. But I started in radio in 1947.
Now, how did you start? You were about 23 when you started in broadcasting?
About that, 23. I was not, let's see, I was just out of the I was out of the Navy for a while. I was just out of college. I went to college on the GI Bill. I had been in the Navy, the U.S. Naval Reserve during World War II, and then being entitled to a college education, excuse me, in this still the greatest country in the world. I went to NYU and I graduated in '47. After I left NYU, I was not happy with my major, which was accounting.
Boring.
I found very boring.
Boring, yeah.
Not just boring, it was painful. What I did was take one job after another. Eventually, I met a guy who you would call a second banana on a local radio station in Newark, where I grew up, born and raised. It was WAAT, 930 on the dial. 930? No. 970 on the dial.
970 on the dial.
His name was Hal Tunis. The big gun was Paul Brenner, who had a show called Requestfully Yours in the 40s. And Hal was also a popular DJ or radio host. And he had separated with his wife, from his wife, and he didn't have a car. She kept the car. And he asked me if I could drive him around to jobs. He would work at a theater and host an amateur night or whatever it was, and I would drive him for a few dollars. And I got to visit his studio and watch him work, and I found it fascinating. And it was Hal who inspired me to become a radio host. And that's the way it started.
What kind of radio show did you have when you first started?
Spinning records on Sunday nights from midnight to 1 a.m. Now, I auditioned for jobs. See, at that time, when I went into radio, there were only about 8 stations in New Jersey. In fact, I guess in the whole country there were perhaps 800 radio stations.
These were all AM stations, of course, back then.
All AM.
All AM.
There was FM, but FM, the AM would simulcast on the FM. It was the same programming. It was not different. That didn't happen until 1969, 68, somewhere in there. And so I auditioned for a few different stations. I couldn't find a job. And so Hal suggested, why don't you buy your own hour on WHBI, which is what I did. And I had to go out and sell the time myself. And I did. I was not much of a salesman, but I fell in love with the microphone. I did the best I could, and it worked out. And it got to a point where I was on 2 hours. I was on from midnight to 2 a.m., and I called myself Midnight Dan.
I love it.
Yeah.
It's a great hour to be broadcasting.
And what I did was play records that other radio stations did not play. There was a station, WOV, with which we shared time. And some of the personalities at that time included a very popular guy by the name of, there was Alan Courtney, and he was replaced by Freddie Robbins.
I've heard of Freddie Robbins.
Yeah, Freddie Robbins was very big with the kids. And that's because he played these unusual records and unusual jazz. Not many of the stations were playing Billy Eckstine and Sarah Vaughan and a lot of the black artists. And now it's African American. But that time it was called sepia, or black artists. And that's what I did. I played Errol Garner.
Oh, one of my favorites.
I played Louis Armstrong. I played Billy Eckstine, Sarah Vaughan, Savannah Churchill, all the
right people.
The right people, yes. And it worked, it clicked, and I had a big carryover audience from the 1280 Club. People would leave their dial set at 1280, and that's where I was.
Oh.
We shared time with WLV.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which worked to my benefit.
Now, how did you get the idea of doing nostalgia? Because your show is the great nostalgia of yesteryear, which is definitely missed on the radio.
Well,
It's a wonderful idea.
I think I always played music that was sort of counterpoint, not what was really very popular, the pop stuff at the moment, but things that were popular 3, 5, or 10 years before. That's something I always did. And it worked, it clicked for me. When I started, the first professional job that I got after WHBI was in WGPA in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. My first job where I actually made a salary of $40 a week.
Wow.
And I was a staff announcer. I did a show at night called the Shellac Shack. Every radio host.
I love the name, Shellac.
Well, everybody did it because 78s were shellac
Right.
in those days. I have a frog in my throat. But anyway, I worked there, and then I moved gradually to other radio stations. And in my career, I've worked for 24 stations.
That's
Yes.
incredible.
I could name them all, but it sounds like
we'd
alphabet
probably
soup.
be here all night. And,
Yeah.
you know, we have about 2 minutes, but very quickly, how do you find all these old records? I mean, they're just, some of them must be very hard to find and locate.
I've been a collector since I was a kid. I started collecting, I think, at 12 or 13. And when I got my first job, companies would send me records. So I had an opportunity to collect more than the ordinary person would. And I saved them. Today I have about 250,000.
250,000 records.
And a lot of records I've discarded.
That's amazing.
78s, I mean hundreds of Shep Fields and Bing Crosby records that I've thrown away.
I'll be in your dumpster next week.
Yeah, well, not anymore, but they're all gone.
That's amazing. Where do you keep them all? And it must be
It was always a problem for my wife, who's gone now, but my basement is loaded with 78s and 45s and LPs.
Wow.
And now CDs.
CDs.
So I've duplicated most of the stuff on CD.
Well, that's incredible. I think we have to kind of hit now for a public service announcement.
Fine.
We are going to be back, and this is Mike saying, you should know this phrase, don't touch that dial.
Yeah.
If you're not helping after-school programs, you're really helping to take them away. After-school programs, wouldn't you rather be helping?
And welcome back to Nostalgia Alley. Dan, in your career, I can't believe it's 59 years you've been.
59 years.
That's incredible.
December the 4th will mark 59 years.
That's going to be quite a party.
A broadcast. Yes, I'm having a lot of nice people.
Good.
Floyd Vivino will be there.
Uncle Floyd? Oh, I used to watch him all the time.
Good friend,
Nice
very
guy.
talented guy.
Great piano
yeah.
player, great ragtime
Great piano,
player.
yes. Very funny. Chuck Wepner, the Bayonne Bleeder, fought
Don't know
Muhammad
him.
Ali. He fought Muhammad Ali in 1975.
Oh, wow.
And I think one of the two guys that knocked Ali to the canvas.
Really?
The other was Joe Frazier.
Got to be very nice to those guys at the party.
Yes. Chuck just made a settlement with Sylvester Stallone because he was the inspiration for Rocky 1, and then 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Yes.
And now 6 is coming up.
Been doing that a long time. Rocky's coming out in the walker now. It's been
Yeah, practically.
Practically. Now you must have met great people. One of the people I always loved was Rudy Valley. You actually knew Rudy Valley.
Well, I knew him. I mean, he was not my social buddy, but I did visit his home up in the Hollywood Hills. He bought his home from Anne Harding. She was a famous actress. A beautiful house on the highest part of the Hollywood Hills on 5 acres. He paid $35,000, he told me, and today it probably is worth more than $35 million.
Oh my!
That's a good investment.
Wow, that's a terrific investment.
And his wife, this was perhaps his 3rd or 4th wife. He was married to Alice Faye and a few other ladies along the way, but his wife is still alive, I think, and still lives in that that mansion. Yes, and he was very nice to me. When I went to visit him, he had a museum downstairs under his home with the raccoon coat that he used to wear and the banners and the megaphones. Before electronic reproduced voice, they used to use a megaphone.
Yes.
And sing through a megaphone. And he had his original megaphone. And a nicer guy I never met. I know there are a lot of bad stories about him. His peculiar ways, that he's mean. Not true. He's a nice guy. He was a nice guy. And I heard he was very frugal. But you couldn't sell me on that because he couldn't have been more generous to me. I had dinner with him, and he and his wife were very nice. And he was at that time on a project reproducing 10 years with the same radio show on ABC Network.
Is that the Fleischman Hour, I think he was on? Yes.
Very good. Fleischman Hour, yeah. But a lovelier guy I never met.
Wow. Now another guy, and I'm going to hold a picture up, was probably one of the best entertainers, which was Al Jolson.
I never met Mr. Jolson. I never met him, but he was, at the height of his career, probably as famous as the Beatles were when they were famous, or Frank Sinatra, or Elvis Presley. He was an icon in the entertainment world. That disappeared eventually, although he made a comeback. He was famous in the teens and the 20s on Broadway, and then in 1927, when Georgie Jessel turned down the starring role in The Jazz Singer because he didn't think talkies could last more than a few weeks. Because he said, Jessel said, no, who cares about, you read what they have to say underneath, you don't have to. Nobody could make a bigger mistake than he did. And Jessel became really internationally famous because of The Jazz Singer.
Sure.
Which Georgie Jessel turned down.
Turned down, amazing.
And he stayed famous until the mid-30s. He started, his fame dissipated, and then he made a comeback in the mid-40s, bigger than ever, in I think it was called The Jolson Story.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Jolson Story.
Larry Parks played Al Jolson, but the voice tracks were all made by Jolson.
And he made a little cameo in that movie, I believe.
He did a little cameo, I think, in a scene way back on a walkway. What do you call it? Walkway.
Yeah.
On a walkway at a theater. That was actually
Al Jolson.
Al Jolson, yes.
Now another great, I have a picture, is of course Bing Crosby.
I never met Mr. Crosby, but he was very, very famous. Very famous. And all his life, because he died unexpectedly, I think, in a fall.
I think he was playing golf and he had a heart attack. What a way to go, doing a thing you love to do, and that's it. You know, I mean. God, that's terrific.
Crosby was comparable to Presley and Jolson, and I suppose Sinatra in his heyday.
Now, another guy I was absolutely fascinated by is Artie Shaw, a very complex individual.
Yes, Artie Shaw walked off the bandstand around 1941 at the height of his career because he got sick of the fans, he was sick of the teenagers, he was sick of playing Begin the Begin, he was sick of everything, and it was a big mistake.
Yes, it was.
He could have been one of the best remembered entertainers of all time. He married every gorgeous woman in Hollywood.
Certainly did.
8 marriages.
Except for my wife. He didn't marry my wife.
That's right. I said in Hollywood.
In Hollywood, okay.
Not in South Orange. But I spoke to him. He was a very cantankerous individual.
In what way?
Well, a fan sent him a letter which he misunderstood. They were telling him about me playing his records and some comments. I don't remember anymore, but his manager called me.
Really?
Yeah, and said that you said some unkind things about Artie Shaw, and I didn't. It was the fan that did it. The fan was telling him how much I loved Artie Shaw and how much I played his records. So I called him. It was about a year before he passed away. And he was very belligerent. I couldn't calm him down.
Amazing.
And that's the kind of guy he was.
Yeah.
Not easy to take.
Then another, of course, is Glenn Miller, who really represented the 40s.
I saw him in person.
Did you?
At the Mosque Theater on Broad Street in beautiful downtown Newark, New Jersey. And I stayed from the first show at 10 in the morning through the last show, which was 10 at night. I hadn't eaten all day.
Wow.
And my mother was worried sick about me. I think at that time I was either just out of 15th Avenue Grammar School in Newark or I was at that time matriculating at Madison Junior High.
Wow.
Either one.
Must have been something to see him perform on,
Yes.
on a big band.
Yes. Glenn Miller was great. I saw Benny Goodman on the Camel Caravan. My father took me to a broadcast. He had some free tickets somehow or other. Took my whole family, my 3 brothers. We loved it.
Now, as a broadcaster, did you have a favorite entertainer?
Favorite entertainer, it's hard to say.
So many good ones out there.
Yeah, I loved them all. I suppose Sinatra was overall my favorite singer of all time.
Did you ever meet Frank? Or
Yes, I did.
What
I
kind
was
of guy? How did that happen?
fortunate. Again, he was very nice to me. I know he was kind of whimsical and tough, but I met him under excellent circumstances. It was Jilly Rizzo's last birthday party before he passed away, and I went with a comedian named Pat Cooper, for whom I emceed a show at a theater in Englewood, New Jersey. And he asked me if I was going to New York, and my wife didn't care much to go, but finally a comedian by the name of Morty Storm, who's gone now, said, "Make the show, you'll love it. Make the party." So I knew Jilly Rizzo, so I went to the party. And at the party, while my wife and I were standing there, Morty came strolling in, and he asked me how the party was, and I said, "It's terrible. Frank Sinatra's been here a half hour, he never said hello to me." And that was a joke, you know, because Sinatra said hello to nobody. And there were some big people, bigger than I was. Buddy Hackett was there, Pat Cooper, all the current comedians, a lot of important Hollywood people, and of course Jilly Rizzo. It was his birthday, and William B. Williams and other radio hosts were there. Sinatra talked to no one.
Wow.
But he did speak, but when I told that to Morty, he says, "Come with me." And he took me over, and there were 2 of Sinatra's goons watching him. But Morty Storm could do whatever he wanted and say whatever he wanted to Sinatra. Sinatra loved him. So I said, Frank, Danny's upset. Danny Stiles. And he said, why? Sinatra said to him, he loved Morty Storm. He said, you haven't spoken to him. You didn't say hello to him. This guy has played your record since 1947. Sinatra, Sinatra. The least you could do is acknowledge him. So he got up, Sinatra, and he hugged me, and he told me to sit down. At that point, my wife ran off because she was totally in awe of meetings. She couldn't handle it. She ran upstairs. She was a very timid, shy woman. Called her mother in Florida and said, you'll never guess who Danny's sitting with and touching and talking to. Barbara and Frank Sinatra. And that was fascinating. We spoke for 5 or 10 minutes. He was very nice to me.
Great. Another guy who, Tommy Dorsey, who was also a fat.
I don't think I ever met Tommy. I knew his brother Jimmy Dorsey.
You knew Jimmy?
Yes, Jimmy.
What was Jimmy like?
Nice guy. You know, I would meet him perhaps at a publicity event of some kind. His singer, Bob Eberly.
Yes.
In his later years, I met Bob and became very friendly with him.
He was a great singer.
Great singer. As a matter of fact, do we have time for a story?
Sure.
Bob had terrible emphysema, and he had lung cancer, and he went to the hospital, and we were very close, and he was staying at, I can't remember, Manhasset General, and it looked like he wasn't going to make it. So I got a call from the chef at the hospital, who was a listener of mine, and he said, maybe you can help him somehow. Speak to his friends and get him to Sloan Kettering in New York, which I did. I called Jilly. Jilly called Frank Sinatra. Sinatra had him taken by ambulance immediately to Sloan Kettering, and he did survive, and he lived on for a few months. He was in bad shape, but he called me on the air on WVNJ, which used to be AM 620 on the dial. It's not anymore, but it's Spanish now. I don't know what it is really, but at that time I was on the air. He called me and we put him on the two-way talk telephone on the air, and he thanked me for helping him and calling Sinatra. And
that's
shortly
terrific.
after that,
I think we're actually running out of time. I don't know whether it's incredible.
I had 150 more stories.
I know. We'll have to do some more. It'd be great. What do we have? About a minute left. Hopefully. No? No. We don't. Okay. We gotta. Danny, I want to thank you, and you know what I want to thank you for? Putting the heart back in radio.
Thank you.
Because you truly have done that. Thank you so much. It's very rare do I get a legend on the show, and Danny Stiles
I
certainly
enjoyed
is.
it very much.
Thank you, Danny.
Thanks for having me.
And this is Mike Sobel saying good night to you, and especially to you.
Martin Block.
Is it?